Hi, this is Ellen Broderick with Inspired Living Podcast, and I am here today with Romy Toussaint, and we're going to have a wonderful conversation. I just want to say a little bit about these podcasts first. So I approach these podcasts as an opportunity to speak to people who I feel have really found a way to be living from their heart, living from that small voice within, and bringing themselves into the world in a unique and wonderful way. So I want to tell you a little bit about our guest today. Romy has so many ways that she brings herself into the world. But I think that the way that probably covers all of the things that she does is this energy queen. So Romy is a person who teaches yoga classes, and she does transformational training. She works with conscious leadership, bringing people into conscious leadership, and also is a motivational speaker for, among other things, large corporations. And I think that she helps people to consciously lead their lives in a way that is fulfilling to them, but also in a way that they bring themselves then into the world in the way that most benefits both themselves and the world. So we could use more of that in this world for sure. So, Romy, let's start with what allows you to bring yourself to people to have them bring their best selves forward. Where in your life did this begin, and what's your path been to this particular calling?
That's a great question. Thank you so much, Ellen, for that introduction. And I think my path started as because I'm the oldest child. I'm the oldest of 5 children, and I think that was just my natural path. I remember the first time I was a significant moment of my life when I was in a leadership position with my siblings was when we came to the United States. We landed at Kennedy Airport, had to go through immigration, and it was me, a tiny bit of suitcases, and my 3 siblings, my 2 sisters and my brother. And I had to get them through this door out where my mom was waving to us. And after getting through immigration, there was like my first time really seeing a sliding door, and it would just kind of like open and close. And I'm like holding on to them and like, is this safe? And just getting through that moment and like seeing my mom through the other side and just being in charge in this airplane, this whole new thing, I think maybe was the beginning of the path. I really just thought about that. But I remember my mom telling the story of how I was just like in control, trying to make sure that everyone was safe. So that's like, it's kind of a significant moment. And we arrived around the 4th of July, and it was like fireworks, like driving through New York City. And I'm like, what a welcome.
They must have heard you were coming.
They knew I was coming. So it was a crazy welcome. But I think this started again as, being on sports teams. But I was a personal trainer for a bit, and I remember people asking me questions or having conversations about life, about how to be better, how to show up as their best selves. And those questions would naturally arise as a personal trainer, as I was helping people to be at their best shape, right? Their best fitness in life. And then that's when I really started to think, maybe I need to learn more. And so with my yoga and diving into conscious leadership work, that felt like a really natural path for something that I could use to help people to navigate questions or inquiries that would naturally come up as I interacted with them. I think also my friends would say, you're my spiritual friend. Like, I'm like, like, I wonder what that means. And I think that was just a natural part of me that always wanted to help people to show up as their best self, to bring out the very best in people and to encourage them to do their work in life. And I think that started as a young person for me.
I think that's so interesting that you say that people would say to you, you're my spiritual friend. So
Mhm.
let's go there a little bit just to hear about what is your spiritual life? What does spirit mean to you? And how does that manifest in the world? How do you bring that into the world?
Yeah, so I think, growing up, raised Catholic, so spiritual to me was religious in the beginning. And I remember a shift in college when I I got up in the morning and wanted to have some connection, some deep connection to something, and just wanting to find that time for myself, as well as literally walking myself across that freezing cold campus at the University of Rochester to go to church,
Mm,
with with my friends. There was something super spiritual about taking that walk in nature across the long path to our
mm,
church, and the church had a view of the water of the river, the Genesee River, right behind it.
mm,
So when we sat, we were watching the mass, but then there's the water and the snow and the nature. And I think looking back, that really drew me in. So
mm,
this way of finding the divine in nature and amongst others, I think that really began to shape my spiritual life, where it was something more than religion
mm,
and a connection, really realizing this connection to divine that included being with people, being with like-minded people, walking to church together, being
mm,
with friends and doing something out in nature that just brought in a super deep connection
mm,
to how we are part of the elements and how they are in us and we are in them. And
mm,
so I think that's really my path. And now spiritual to me means exactly that connection to the divine that is in me, that is in you, that is in all of us, in this powerful nature that nourishes us, that is always there for us to go to and get rekindled and get recharged. So yeah, spirit to me means all of that, and connection to people is so huge.
mm,
I am just that deep connection to friendships and relationships, like kindling relationships to me is spirit. So
mhm.
yeah, I hope that's a good enough answer.
It's a wonderful answer. I'm still back in some part at the walking across campus as being as much a part of the spiritual experience as being in the church and looking out.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so it in some way speaks of the internal connection to oneself and then what you bring outward from there. And a lot of people, I think, move through life being aware of one or the other and not necessarily aware that both are true, that we are both
Yeah.
individual beings
Hmm.
in this individual body and with our own thoughts and experiences. And yet there's a really deep connection that we all have with one another. And that nurturing of the divine in everyone is a beautiful practice.
Absolutely. And I think another way of really bringing that to a deep understanding for me came through one of my most advanced yoga teacher trainings. In fact, I was teaching a yoga teacher training, and my philosophy partner, really talked about this idea of all of us being these beautiful waves in the giant ocean.
Mm,
It's such a simple explanation that I think helps people to understand, like, that deep spiritual connection that we have with ourselves and with one another and with the divine creator, right? So we're these waves, and some are
mm,
high and some are fat and some are
mm,
really big waves, and some are super strong and some are super mellow, like the beautiful Caribbean Ocean that I'm from, just like
mm,
whew. And
mm,
but in the midst of all of that, above, below is this oneness, that
mm,
there is no distinguishing from one drop of water to another in this big ocean,
mhm,
which is all of us. And I think that's like a really cool definition of spirit, how
mhm,
it's individual and how it's common and how it's so beautiful and rich. And we spend our lifetimes distinguishing ourselves from one another,
mhm,
separating ourselves from one another. I am this and I am that. And when we take off all those labels, we are one. We are spirit together. There's no separation.
I started my career as a early childhood teacher, and sometimes I worked with very young children, up to 5 years old, and I often thought they had more to teach me just about the true nature of being. And when you're talking right now, it is reminding me that in a way it's a practice of getting back to what we originally knew, which you described so beautifully in the wave and the different shapes and sizes of waves, but all being a part of the ocean, and not having even a distinguishable identity, because the wave, of course, is there for a matter of moments or minutes, and then is again part of the eternal and the whole.
Yes. Yeah, it's a great way of remembering. And and why do we forget so much so often? As we go about the day, we keep forgetting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about how you then bring that understanding into your work. And it could be into your work as a yoga teacher, or into your work as a motivational speaker, or into your work guiding people to their most true selves. How does that connect for you?
It's a great question. I think for me, because the essence of that is always there. So everything that I do that is different is just another way of, it's like speaking a different language, right? It's like translating. I'm going to translate it into Spanish over here, right? I'm going to translate it into Portuguese. So maybe my Spanish is my yoga, right? Like I'm translating that message as I'm teaching a beautiful yoga class, and I do it through the yamas and the niyamas. So, by really focusing the disciplines in every class, finding a way to have a theme where that spirituality is embodied in a way that someone is going to get it through their body, through their breath, and hopefully take it with them throughout the day. And deeper into their lives.
Some of our listeners won't know what yamas and niyamas are.
Yes.
So could you give a little explanation about what those are and how they can help to guide people's lives?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that a lot of people have experienced a physical yoga practice, an asana practice. And, of course, you have to breathe. So you experience pranayama, and then you're focusing and concentrating on what you're doing. So you're experiencing the other fifth and sixth limb of yoga. But a lot of us don't get to experience the first two principles, the first two limbs of yoga, which is the principles, which are the yamas, which are the 5 universal principles that we can all agree to live by, such as the number 1, non-violence, truth, non-stealing, non-hoarding, and moderation. So these 5 principles are what was really taught in the ancient days before even physical poses are taught, right? So that the yogi would understand what is the goal of the practice is to be incredibly loving to ourselves so that we can be loving to others, to really live and honor our truth, to practice non-stealing, non-hoarding, and really living in moderation. And that each of those have such significant meanings. And what I love about them is that we're not told this is how we should do it, well, here's what to consider. What does nonviolence look like in your life, in your speech, and how you eat and how you speak and how you love, right? So they're just wonderful principles that remind me of the 10 commandments, that remind me of, the things we learn in kindergarten. And we can carry them on with us throughout the day and throughout our lives. And in the disciplines are also similar, things like self-discipline, self-study, practicing, again, moderation and devotion to a higher power, and cleanliness. And so those are wonderful principles that I try to infuse in a yoga practice, even if it's 30 minutes or an hour. That's going to give someone a really good takeaway that is part of that spiritual practice. That helps us to maybe formulate a new GPS, right, for our lives. And so I love that. So that's one way that it comes out when I'm teaching yoga. in conscious leadership work, when I'm teaching that, that's another way that it also comes out. For example, this idea of taking 100% responsibility for the circumstances in our lives and not being in the drama triangle, right? Not being a victim, a villain, or a hero of our circumstances, but getting curious and noticing where we are in any situation. So it comes out there as well. Which is something else that I do. And then, as a yoga health coach, we're talking about how do we live in harmony with nature, really honoring that we are these five main elements, and that they exist in nature, and how do we set up daily habits so that we are in union with nature, so that we are preparing ourselves to live a super healthy life, so that we can show up energized, so we can fulfill our work in the world.
Yeah.
And so that's what these habits are all about, that we can get enough sleep, we eat well, we take time to sit in silence so that we can show up present and do our work in the world. So I feel like everything I do has the same theme, even though I wear different hats. But they all come together. Even if leading a yoga retreat in Peru, where I just got back from recently, we're doing yoga, we're hiking out in nature, we're communing with people, and it all comes together in every conversation, in every moment throughout a retreat in a foreign country. So yeah.
I have so many questions that I want to pose for you, but I want to go back for a moment just to the idea of ahimsa, because I was reading recently the Bhagavad Gita, which really is based on the same principles, and uses two characters, one of them being Krishna, or the divine, and the other being a noble but confused warrior, to actually allow us all to more deeply understand both our ability to go through the world in a way that can be clumsy at times and imperfect, but also a striving toward the true nature, which is, of course, love. And I took a yoga class with you once. I'm not sure if you even remember this, but it was an online class, and it was about opening the heart. And it occurs to me, as you're talking about what you bring in to your classes, that you are both allowing people to experience their own energy, the life force moving through them, and the excitement that can bring and into their being, and into their purpose, and into their expression in the world. But you're also planting seeds that this is not all there is. This is in service of something even more extraordinary. And I wonder if you want to respond to that, and what you would say to that.
Well, I just want to sit with that. that you observe that makes me feel happy that is coming out. And I think that is this idea of planting a seed and making little suggestions. And when you plant that seed, we have no idea where it's going to go. And what I love about it is, sometimes I feel like, this is repetitious, right? And we have to hear things so many different ways, and we have to be open and ready to experience them. So I just never know if I'm inspired to read a poem on that day, or to do a certain sequence, or to chant, who it's going to affect and how it's going to affect them. And so I love living from that inspiration, and which to me comes from nature as well, to just sort of like sit and be in silence. Sometimes I have no idea what I'm going to teach. And I never really teach the same class ever. And I will just like look for some kind of inspiration. And sometimes it comes just by looking at the room, and then having a presencing practice where I connect with people and just ask what's going on. And then it comes to me. So I just really like to be inspired by the divine
Mm.
and by the people who show up, and just looking at their faces and trusting that something is going to come up for me, that is a gift, that it's not from, hopefully from my ego, but as a and something that is inspiring, that comes from God, that I
Mhm.
can share.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Um, Again, eight questions in my head, but let's take the aspect of having been brought up Catholic. I'm assuming that in your class there are people who aren't Catholic, and what is the connection that you have to people who are looking to you for guidance of one sort or another? In all of these different arms of Romy, around the honoring of their own spiritual beliefs and their own spiritual paths, and how that unfolds.
Another amazing question. And I think what works for me is going back to my experience of overcoming so many fears, of overcoming suspicions, of overcoming, of finding my own way through my religion, questioning it, feeling a sense of not belonging, feeling fear at my yoga teacher training of how my religion's like, there, you shall have no other God, and all of that, and just dealing with that, and just really making friends with it, and having compassion for myself, and studying and reading different resources to come to an understanding that we are one, that there is, if something's giving me fear, like, I wonder, what story do I have about it? And what's unclear for me? What don't I understand? And how can, like, we're not all so different. We're alike in seeking, everyone is seeking the light. And so I bring in my own experience from, oh yeah, I experienced that fear. I remember when I felt bad during teacher training because I felt I was betraying the way that I grew up. I remember when I wanted to lead a Bible study in my home, and the people said, well, that Romy, she can't host a Bible study. She does that yoga thing. And just being able to be in that place of discomfort, and understanding, like, why am I so attracted to yoga? Why am I so attracted? What is it about it that I'm so attracted to? And spending time reading, understanding it, practicing it, and feeling my truth, my satya, feeling this comfort with God being this loving being that is limitless. And so I just go from my personal story. I share my truth about how hard it was for me. And here's what I understand. Here's my understanding of it. And feel your feelings and ask your questions, and then notice, what does it feel like after you've done a yoga practice? What does it feel like after you've walked outside and you've communed with God? What does it feel like, when you do this? And make it make sense for you. So not dictating anything, but really going by my personal experience and what I did to come to a place of comfort, a place of understanding that there is so much richness in so many different paths.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. I love that that you don't turn away from what is you and what is true for you to make room for other people, but that you use it as your platform to be true in your connection to others. That's very lovely, and it rings so true to me for what I know of you.
Yeah,
I,
thanks.
I also wanted to just touch base on the kinds of, we spoke at one point, and something that you said was reminding me of this, but we spoke of at one point, we both happen to love the prayer of Saint Francis of Assisi. And I think, if I'm recalling correctly, that that you referred to the song and to, I believe, your sister singing it at a special occasion for you. And I just wonder what it is about poetry, maybe that particular poem or any other, that speaks to you, because I think from following that part of the conversation, you revealed just how much certain poetry and prose, how they speak to you in a very particular way. And I know what it was that you said was that you sometimes will share a poem or a reading of something that may inspire you at a particular time in one of your classes. You don't necessarily know ahead of time.
I don't. Yeah. And I think there's something magical about poetry that allows every one of us to receive something. And I especially love the Prayer of St. Francis, all kinds of songs, Thomas Merton. I read poetry not just in yoga, but in conscious leadership, or even in yoga health coaching. Because again, there's a way that we each hear like a little something that will catch our heart, that will make sense for each of us. And I think it's like another universal language. I love going around and reading a poem and having everyone talk about what pinged for them, like what pinged for you, like even in a yoga class, like tell me one word that spoke to you, and to just really help people to dive a little deeper. So I think it helps us to go a little deeper, just like music really helps us as well. I think poetry has that power. In fact, I just picked up a new book. Let me grab it. This one called Homebody.
Oh, I don't know.
I just received that. Something I read this weekend, and I picked it up, and this morning I sat and just went through it. Just so much beauty in here, and just a whole life revelation in these short words. I think poetry has a way of being so concise. I wish I could write poem, but there's a way that it really brings it down to one word that will just hit you in the heart and summarize it for you. And I think so that's for me, that's really helpful in teaching.
There's a form of painting that I do called sumi-e, which is it's ink painting, and in it, it's originally Chinese, and the Japanese adapted and added color. But you are not trying to have all the detail come through of your subject matter. What you want to come through is the essence. And so the fewer the strokes in order to convey that essence, the more beautiful it actually is. And I think that poetry is that as well.
That's a great way of describing it. Yeah, really bring it down to the essence. I'd love to experience your painting like that.
Well, maybe one day we'll do that, Romy. I think this is a good place to share this poem that I actually just popped out at me, and I thought this is really it speaks to me of your ability to be in the world in this way, and it's a Rumi poem, and it's very short.
Romy.
There you go. I didn't even think about that, but so true. And Rumi, I don't think he wrote the poems. I think he spoke them, which of course is how poetry is conveyed with its, I think, most beautiful essence is through the spoken word. But his disciples who were there with him, at least one of them, but sometimes maybe others, would write them down. So this poem is, I want to sing like the birds sing, not worry about who hears or what they think. I want to sing like the birds sing, not worry about who hears or what they think. Romy, I wish we had more and more time to speak, because I find you to be delightful and such an example of someone who lives in this world open-heartedly or wholeheartedly. And before we go, can you just share how people could get in touch with you, how they could find more out about you, your
Sure.
website, or anything else?
Yeah, well, I will, but I want to thank you for the gift of that poem because it feels like a true gift for me. If you knew my meditation this morning, it was about slightly not feeling good enough, and this is just such a great gift, a reminder for me to keep singing my song by showing up in on my path. So thank you. Not worrying. Thank you so much. Yeah, you can reach me. My name, ROMYOGA, ROMYYOGA, ROMYYOGA, ROMYYOGA.com. Same thing, ROMYYOGA@gmail.com. Yeah, I'm here, and thank you so much for having me.
Well, this has
Ellen, it
been a
was such
total
a
joy.
pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for doing this because you ask great questions, which helps me to feel more like, oh yeah, I'm on the path. I like this. So thank you. That's, you bring out the essence in all of us. So I really appreciate that. And thank you for this gift.
Well, thank you so much for coming. And I know you are a busy woman, and to find the time to sit and just share in this way, I think is a real gift, not only to me, it certainly is a gift to me, but to the people who will listen as well. So
this time is a gift. So thank you.
Yeah. So that's going to wrap it up for today on the podcast, and I hope you'll tune in again next week. And again, thank you so much to Romy Toussaint, and we will see you next week when we have another interview with another individual who will hopefully enlighten or inspire your life in some little or larger way. Thank you.